In the shadows of history lie warriors who fought, and often died without the world ever knowing their names. They rose in rivers, forests, mountains, against empires armed with gunpowder and greed. These are the stories they didn't teach you. This is Africa's silent resistance. Chapter 1. The Sofala Uprising. Mozambique's lost resistance. In 1507, Portuguese ships docked on the golden shores of Sofala, Mozambique, hungry for wealth and imperial conquest. But they were not met with silence. They were watched, calculated against. The Swahili and Shona people, longtime traders and warriors, united behind ancestral alliances and fortified villages. Their weapons may have been simple, spears, arrows, and sabotage, but their strategy was sharp. They launched precision attacks, ambushing Portuguese convoys in the night, setting traps in dense forests, and retreating before retaliation. Their knowledge of the land made them ghosts to the invaders. The resistance even targeted Portuguese trading posts, cutting off food and water supplies. In some cases, they poisoned wells or burned crops to deny resources to the enemy. This was a war of attrition, one waged with cunning. The Portuguese, shocked by the resistance, reinforced their garrisons and brought more soldiers. But the fire they encountered in Sofala was not easily extinguished. Resistance was not just physical, it was spiritual, cultural, and enduring. Though eventually overwhelmed, the spirit of Sofala's fighters inspired a legacy of revolt along the East African coast that echoed for centuries. Chapter 2. The Women of Abeokuta, Nigeria's Feminist Rebellion. By the 1940s, colonial oppression had pushed the Yoruba women of Abeokuta to a breaking point. Markets were taxed, rights stripped, and their voices dismissed. But these women were not invisible. Under the fearless leadership of Funmilayo Ransom Kuti, thousands of women formed the Abeokuta Women's Union. They were mothers, traders, farmers, but above all, they were warriors and rappers. They used songs as weapons, satire as resistance. They surrounded government buildings, blocked roads, and demanded to be heard. The women refused to pay taxes and instead held mass gatherings, sometimes lasting days. They sang songs mocking the colonial rulers and publicly shamed corrupt officials. Their resistance was culturally rooted and politically sharp. Funmilayo and her sisters confronted the Alake of Abeokuta directly, challenging his rule and denouncing his collusion with the British. It was not just protest, it was revolution. Eventually, their pressure forced the Alake to abdicate, a rare and powerful victory in the colonial era. These women didn't wait for liberation. They forged it with fire in their throats and iron in their resolve. Chapter 3. The Kimurenga Spirit. Zimbabwe before it was Zimbabwe. Long before Zimbabwe gained independence, its soil ran red with the blood of the first Kimurenga, a spiritual war for land, identity, and sovereignty. In 1896, Mbuya Nhanda, a revered spirit medium of the Shona people, became the voice and symbol of resistance. With her guidance, warriors rose against British settlers encroaching on sacred lands. The resistance was fierce. Missions were burned, farms taken back, colonial officers targeted. For months, it seemed the settlers would lose their grip. The Shona and Ndebele, often divided by history, came together under a spiritual mandate. They viewed the war not just as a military act, but as a sacred duty to the ancestors. But the British, with their modern rifles and reinforcements, struck back. Villages were torched, leaders captured. The uprising was brutally crushed. Mbuya Nhanda was hanged, her body broken but not her spirit. Her last words, "My bones shall rise again," would echo through time, inspiring Zimbabwe's later liberation struggle almost a century later. Chapter 4. The Battle of Adwa. Ethiopia's shocking victory. In 1896, Italy attempted to make Ethiopia its colony. What they didn't expect was a fully mobilized empire under Emperor Menelik II, ready to meet them on the battlefield. Ethiopians from all provinces, Oromo, Amhara, Tigray, marched together. Some came on horseback, others on foot. Priests blessed them, elders prayed, warriors sharpened blades. On March 1st, on the mountains of Adwa, they clashed. Italy's forces, misinformed and overconfident, were outmaneuvered. Ethiopian cavalry thundered through weak flanks. Archers and riflemen delivered devastation. The battlefield was a whirlwind of dust and fire. Ethiopian commanders used decoys, feints, and mountain knowledge to trap and overwhelm European formations. By the end of the battle, Italy had lost over 7,000 soldiers. It was a catastrophic defeat. The world was stunned. A black nation had defeated a European empire in open battle. Adwa was not just a victory. It was a message to every colonized people. Africa could rise. Ethiopia remained independent. Its flag a symbol of hope across the continent. Chapter 5. The Busa Revolt, Resistance on the Niger. In 1805, in what is now Nigeria, King Busa stood as a wall between the British and their desire to dominate the Niger River's trade routes. The British sought to control river access to fuel their commercial empire. But Busa's forces knew the terrain, the bends, the islands, the narrow passes. They launched daring water ambushes, using swift canoes to isolate enemy vessels, cutting them off and capturing supplies. It was guerrilla warfare on water. The locals used hidden channels and sandbars to create bottlenecks. They painted their canoes in camouflage and used natural cover to shield movement. Despite their valor, British firepower and diplomacy eventually wore down Busa's defenses. He died in the fight, but his stand had ripple effects. Today, Chapter 6, The Bambatha Rebellion, South Africa's Forgotten War. In 1906, British colonial rulers in Natal imposed a poll tax on every adult male. For the Zulu people, already strained by land seizures and exploitation, it was the last straw. Chief Bambatha Kamansinza refused compliance. He rallied his people in the dense Kamla forests, reviving the spirit of Zulu resistance. His warriors, skilled in close combat and ambush tactics, struck colonial patrols and disrupted supply lines. It was a war of principle, not just survival. Using cowhide shields and spears, they attacked convoys under the cover of darkness and melted back into the hills. Villagers provided food, shelter, and information. The British responded with overwhelming force, deploying machine guns and mass arrests. The rebellion was crushed. Bambatha was declared dead, though rumors say he escaped. Regardless of his fate, Bambatha's name became a symbol of righteous defiance. In apartheid era, South Africa, he was remembered in whispers and in songs. Chapter 7. The Mau Mau, Guerrillas in Kenya's Forests. In the 1950s, British settlers controlled the best land in Kenya, while the Kikuyu people were pushed to crowded reserves. Tensions erupted into rebellion. The Mau Mau, drawn mostly from Kikuyu youth, took to the forests. They trained in secret, shared blood oaths, and prepared for long war. Using traps, sabotage, and nighttime raids, they disrupted farms, railroads, and colonial strongholds. The British labeled them terrorists, but could not ignore them. In the forest camps, recruits studied politics, made weapons, and kept morale high with songs and dances. It was a movement forged in pain, but driven by hope. The colonial response was brutal: detention camps, executions, and forced labor. But the Mau Mau endured, fueled by injustice and ancestral pride. Though independence came later through diplomacy, it was the Mau Mau who broke the silence first. Today, Kenya honors them as the spark that lit the fire. New Chapter 8. The Asani Wars, Ghana's Unbreakable Kingdom. From 1823 to 1900, the powerful Asani Empire, in what is now Ghana, clashed repeatedly with the British in a series of bloody confrontations. These wars were not brief skirmishes. They were full-scale battles involving thousands of warriors, cannons, and political intrigue. The Asante army, disciplined and hierarchically organized, used drums to signal commands and battle formations inherited from centuries of statecraft. Queen Mother Yassanawa, in 1900, became the fierce symbol of the final war. She took up arms after the British demanded the sacred golden stool. Her defiant words, "If the men will not fight, then the women will," ignited a rebellion that held off British forces for months. Though the British ultimately claimed Kumasi, the Asani never surrendered culturally or spiritually. Their identity endured and remains strong to this day. A continent that refused to bow. These were not just uprisings. They were declarations. We are not yours to conquer. Their names are absent from textbooks, but they carved freedom with fire and blood. They were silenced, but they were never defeated. Let the silence end. Tell their stories. Remember their names.